What's up, book babes? Get comfy, get cozy. It's time to chill. If you're here for fictional drama, book boyfriends, and no notes required, you're in the right place. I'm Cassie.
And I'm Emily, and this is the Book Bits Club. Today we're covering Emily Henry's Great Big Beautiful Life, chapters 11 through 20, and we left off steaming, so kick it off.
Wow. All right, we're in a steamer. So we left off with Alice and Hayden sharing this steamy schmooch. They are literally lips locked, and Hayden decides to just dump an absolute ice bucket over them, and he's like, no, we can't do this. We are literally competing for the same job. We are arch nemesis career wise, but then, you know, friends on the side, whatever. And Alice is like, it's fine. And he's like, it's actually not fine because I know that I'm going to win this, and I feel bad. I would feel bad hooking up with you knowing that I'm going to win. And Alice is like, are you fucking kidding me? What is wrong with you?
Like, I'm here for the D. Why are we talking about our jobs? You're in my backyard sweating in your chinos and you're 6'4".
So she's like, get out of here, Bram. I don't want to see you. And he's like, okay. And so he leaves, and she's like, you know what? I'm going to double down on my professionalism, and I'm going to fucking show him that I could win this.
Yeah.
So she meets up with Margaret the next day, and they're on this little boat, this little marsh boat. They're literally where the crawdads sing. They're like hanging out. There's mosquitoes literally everywhere. They don't have any DEET apparently because they're literally just getting eaten alive. And Margaret starts talking a little bit more about her family. And so we pick up where we left off with Lawrence, where he has started this empire essentially in Nevada off of all of his silver findings. And after he acquires this newspaper in San Francisco, he's like, I'm going to move to California and I'm going to continue to eat up newspapers essentially. So he does that. He becomes a part of the California elite, and he ends up meeting this daughter who belongs to a railroad family, whatever. Everyone's in a railroad family at this stage.
Everybody's in a railroad family.
Everyone is a part of Thomas the Truck.
Thomas the Tank. Or if you want to the tank. Or if you want to be more realistic, they're probably part of the Rockefeller family.
Or that. So they end up starting a family. They have Gerald, and then they also have a daughter named Gigi. So Gerald is Margaret's grandfather. And this is where she says a very interesting line. And she says that he is the beginning of the end. Very ominous. We don't know what this means quite yet. So Gerald, we start to learn, ends up growing up with daddy issues because Lawrence won't pay attention to him. He won't look at him, whatever. Meanwhile, Gigi's free spirit, off with her horses. Lawrence is obsessed with her, whatever. And Gerald's like, look at me. Well, why aren't you looking at me? And so he grows up, and his dad gives him a newspaper. He's like,
a weak newspaper.
Figure this out. A little bitty newspaper. He's like, this newspaper is in the literal toilet, so whatever, you can't fuck it up. And Gerald's like, you know what? I'm going to turn this around and show him who is the real boss here. So turns out he has this eye for talent. Gerald, Lawrence's strength was that he was very cunning in starting these businesses and whatever, but Gerald
willing to cut his friends at the Achilles.
And literally willing to cut anyone at the knees. So Gerald's talent is finding the people that are going to be able to make these news outlets great. So he ends up turning around his newspaper. He acquires multiple other ones. He acquires magazines, whatever. He starts this whole Ives media empire and decides that California is just a little bit too small for him and moves to New York. And this is where he ends up meeting a woman named Rosalind. And this woman, she's the daughter of a governor. And she has a lot of social capital. She's kind of a little darling in New York because she does a lot for social good and whatever. And so Gerald's that would work well for me. And so he marries Rosalind and essentially gets in with the New York elite on her back. So he continues to acquire newspapers there.
Classic women have pride on their coattails.
Typical. He tries to run for president twice. He fails, whatever. There's a whole thing where Gerald clearly thinks he can take over the world, and it's sir, relax.
You have daddy issues, go to therapy, don't run for president.
go to therapy, stop trying to take over the country. Wink, wink, nod, point, point. So then they have 2 kids and they move back to California. They're in San Francisco and his dad dies and still doesn't acknowledge him. And Gerald like basically has a mental breakdown and ends up moving to Hollywood and just leaving behind his entire family. He's like, ciao, I'll literally never see you guys again. He meets this woman who's a singer, actress. Her name's Nina. And he just ends up in a full-blown relationship with her, like literally for like years, spends 12 years away from these people, and then ends up breaking up with Nina, relocating the family to him because him and Rosalind are literally still married. Like, this is bananas time. I'm like, the way that if I was Rosalind, I would be on a beach in Tahiti, never going back to this man.
She talks about it in the book. She's like, you could have an affair, like you could have a hush-hush affair. Your close circle could know about it, but you are not getting divorced.
No. They were very Catholic at this point.
So Rosalind was like, leave me, honestly, to my happiness in San Francisco. I've got the kids.
Exactly.
You take the hoe.
So Nina ends up moving on. She ends up marrying this doctor because she got this like weird illness at some point, and she meets this doctor through that. Essentially, Gerald like buys this huge compound of a house, which is like Casa de Ives. It's basically like the house of Gucci.
He called it the House of Ives, right?
Yes, yeah. And so the whole family moves there. Her sister Gigi moves there. Her daughter Ruth moves there, and his kids obviously hate him. So Gerald like really bonds with Ruth because she's a lot younger, and basically treats Ruth like.
And he gets a free redo. He's like, here's a young one I haven't ruined yet.
Exactly. So the whole time Marg is sharing all of this, Alice is like, there is something that she is not saying. There's something that she's not sharing. Something is off here. And at some point, Margaret says there are all kinds of reasons for a woman to want to disappear. What does that mean? We don't know.
This is where, like, I was reading this part at night, and I don't like thrillers, and I was wondering if I was going to turn into one right now. I was like, why do women disappear, Margaret?
Why? Tell us, please, in a non-scary way.
So we end with this ominous note, and we flash to the next day, and Alice is going to Little Crescent to get her morning coffee. And she's sitting in the car, and no other than Captain Cecil knocks on her window and is like, hey, little thing, what are you doing? And there's a moment where Alice is like, I love Cecil. Him and I have the same personality. And I'm like, do not compare yourself to this man. Please do not. And he's like, Captain, I'm having a birthday party hosted at the Fishbowl tonight. Come on by. And before this, Alice had heard from Theo, the situationship, briefly, and was like, hey, I'm actually a couple hours away from you doing a photo shoot. So if you want me to drive up to you, I'd love to meet up. And she's like, okay, Cecil, can my situationship come to your birthday party? And again, Cecil, concerning, he's like, the more the merrier. And so she has this plan to meet up with Theo at the birthday party. So she goes to the birthday party, and she's like, walks in and sees none other than, who do we know? Hayden drinking a water at the birthday party. How did he get invited? Because he is not Cecil's type. Alice realizes she doesn't really know anybody at the party, so I guess she'll be nice and go talk to Hayden, even though he pulled that dick move. So she goes up there and she's like, I might mess it up, Cass, you're laughing.
No, you're right. I'm laughing because Alice literally cannot figure out how to play hard to get with this man. And like, you wear every emotion, every ounce of your emotion on your shoulder, and that is it.
Yeah, she's too nice. She can't like find negativity in her body. So she's like
so
always the peacemaker. So she goes up and he's like, I got invited here by Cecil, but we didn't have the same conversation you had. He didn't smile at me. And you're like, okay, Hayden. Like,
Yeah, like, no shit, Hayden.
yeah. And so he's like, what are you doing here? And she's like, I'm actually waiting for a date. Ring-a-ding-ding. These phone calls come out of nowhere. She picks up the phone and it's Theo. And he's like, I'm not going to make it. My shoot ran late. My flight leaves in the morning. There's no point in me driving up. So she realizes at this point that she's left her purse inside with Hayden. The tears are welling in the eyes, but she's got to get out of here. So she's like, suck it up, Alice. Go grab the purse and get your butt home. And so she runs in to grab the purse, and hawk-eyed Hayden somehow sees the 2 tears floating in her eyes and is like, Alice, no, Alice, wait. And so she's running down the street and he's running after her and he grabs her arm, and Emily mentions that he grabs her arm lightly so that they aren't in fear that this is a domestic violence situation. And he turns her around and is like, tell me what's wrong. And she proceeds to let him know exactly what's wrong because the girl cannot keep any sense of mystery.
Correct.
And then what exactly happens here?
I think he's like, hey, like, I am sorry for what I said the other night. And like, I completely should not have said that, whatever. And she's like, whatever. I know that you think that I'm no competition. I know you think I'm not shit, whatever. And this is when they start to get into their emotional conversation. So basically, they just go back and forth, and they both figure out that they both like are obviously attracted to each other, but also that they actually want to be friends with each other. And Alice is just burnt out from dealing with men. She's like, whatever, I believe you're a good guy, fine. And they end up kissing at her car again, like a steamy a kiss at her car. And like literally, I think he has like her skirt lifted up.
Yeah, he's like way more forward than you would expect.
Yeah, he's like, why are you always wearing these skirts that are driving me crazy? And she's like, why are you always wearing chinos that literally when we're in 400-degree weather? And so they like hook up at the car real quick, and then they're like, we can't keep doing this, like, but we do want to be friends.
They don't have sexual relations.
They do not have sexual relations, which Alice at this point is actually so thirsty with a capital T. Someone get her a straw and a cup because she is like, come home with me, like, come back with me. And he's like, no.
We are literally not doing this, Alice. How many times do I have to turn you down?
So yes, that is how that ends. They decide to be friends and decide to quote unquote not make out anymore.
So Alice goes home and she's like, better do a little bit of research because this man still thinks I'm part of his competition. And so she cannot stop thinking about how Margaret's lying, and she cannot stop thinking about a face that Margaret made when she said, what's the name of that hotel in Nevada? And she said the current 2025 name of the hotel. Weird, right? So she starts doing a little research, and she realizes that the hotel used to be called by many a names, and one of them was Nicolette. So she's reading some old papers about Ruth Allen, the niece, Gigi's daughter. Gigi. And she's like, okay, Ruth's full name is Ruth Nicolette Ives Allen. And she's like, Nicolette, bing, 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 bing. All the signs are going off in her head. She's like, something's going on with this hotel. And so Cassie, take it from there.
Okay. So Alice is pissed because Margaret is very clearly hiding stuff from her. And she goes over to Marg's the next day and she's like, Marg, what the fuck? You are going to tell me about this fucking hotel. And Marg's like, you're right. I do need to tell you about this. And Margaret decides to tell her, but she's like, you cannot tell Hayden. Like, you have to keep this between the two of us because I don't trust him yet. And then, like,
One point for Alice.
1 point for Alice, but Alice decides to not take the point, of course. And she's like, you can trust Hayden. It's like,
oh, girl,
okay.
Get off his chinos.
Okay. So basically, Mark's like, okay, Alice, literally gird your loins because you're going to be the first person to hear this outside of my immediate family. So Nicolette was the only other thing that Lawrence, remember her great-grandfather, talked about on his deathbed. So on his deathbed, he only spoke about his sister, who he basically had like left behind in poverty, and this Nicolette person. And they're like, who is that? Turns out that Nicolette is actually the sister.
Yep.
And so Gerald decided...
The surviving six, the original six.
The OG six. So so Gerald, after he dies, a part of his spiral is actually him renaming the hotel to Nicolette after Lawrence dies. And so this name basically becomes a representation for the Ives family, for someone that you do anything for or give it all up for. So that is why they gave Ruth this middle name. And she's like making eyes at Alice this whole time. She's like, Alice, figure it the fuck out, connect the dots, be the journalist that I know that you are. And Alice is like, whoa. Ruth wasn't Gigi's daughter. She was Gerald's daughter with Nina.
Nina wasn't sick. She was pregnant. Classic early 1900s, sent her to the nunnery. She can't be pregnant out of wedlock.
So they literally, Nina goes like on a tour of Europe essentially during her 9 months of pregnancy. They like cover the whole thing up, whatever. And they come up with the perfect cover up because Gigi's husband died. And so Gigi's like, sure, I'll raise Ruth as my pseudo daughter and Gerald will raise her as his niece. And so basically, they did all of this to obviously cover up the fact that they had a child out of wedlock, but also to protect Rosalind and whatever. You know, their perception is a whole thing.
Right.
And they find all of this out, or Alice figures this all out because she had looked up Ruth's wedding, and that was the only time that Gerald and Nina ever reunited in public. Nina went to this wedding. But anyway, so Ruth dies in this plane crash, and
they don't give a lot of detail about it.
No, it was very sketchy. And this is when Margaret also says that her family is a curse, which was very sketchy. And this was actually when Gerald was going to tell Ruth that she is his daughter. Like,
right.
Like basically goes and is like, please tell her. And he's like, you're right. I'm going to tell her tonight. Dies. So
and it was like the universe didn't want the truth to come out.
Exactly. And I think Alice at some point says like, oh my God, obviously that's so tragic, whatever. I'm surprised more this wasn't covered. And Marg's like, the world moved on just like we hoped it would, or something like that. It's like, oh,
this girl is dripping in trauma.
Dripping in sketchiness. And so that's where the story leaves off.
So the next day, Alice is like, let me go check out these mosaics that I have seen Margaret making in her house, because Margaret's a local artist that goes by the name, what is it, Irene?
Yes.
Irene. And she's like, I want to go see what's going on out there with this artwork. So she goes to the local mosaic shop, and it's a lot of like turtles, beaches, little trinkets that the tourists are buying. But then she sees a giant mosaic on the back wall that is just so beautiful, and she immediately knows it's Margaret's. And she's so entranced by it. And the shopkeeper comes up and is like, I don't think I can ever get rid of this one, but I also don't think anybody's going to ever buy it for this price. And Alice is like, I'm gonna buy it for this price. And the shopkeeper is like, it's $2,500. And Alice is like, never mind. I literally don't have a savings account. And so she finds this little trinket that's another mosaic tile by Margaret, and it's titled Nicolette. And she's like, it's meant to be. It's meant to be. And she buys it. And she does wonder, I wonder if that shopkeeper is the one that teed me off that Margaret was on Little Crescent Island.
Yeah,
but
she's
still,
like, lady, where are you?
the mystery persists. So we're back to Alice's day to be with Margaret, okay? She's like, we have got to almost be to the real Margaret story at this point, because we've been through great granddaddy 10, 12, and 11. And so we unfortunately are not to the Margaret story yet. We're at Frederick, her father. So Frederick is what he describes as lazy. He's like, I'm a little bit lazy. I don't have the work ethic that my father had, and he thinks I'm such a disappointment. So his dad is like, I'm going to give you this wash-up job. Sounds familiar, doesn't it, Gerald? That's what your father did to you, and now you're doing it. Generational trauma.
These Ives men cannot get it together.
And that's why Margaret was like, this all adds up. It comes generation to generation. And so Frederick gets put in this Hollywood movie studio that his father had from being with Nina, and is like, just read these scripts and tell me which ones are good and which ones are bad. And you already know Gerald filtered this to be duds already. He doesn't trust him. And in comes this woman barging into his office. She's in a power suit. She's got flats on. She has flats on, and it's the mid-1900s. Women only wore kitten heels. So
that's right.
She's got flats on, and he's like, damn, this woman means business. And this girl is none other than Bernie. And he ends up being like, I think I found my match in this woman. And I think that I'm in love with her. And they end up starting their love affair.
But I think this part is interesting because you can start to see this turn in how Margaret is sharing. Like, she kind of notes that she's like nervous about how the book will essentially like portray her family, because she makes a good point. Like, people are very nuanced. Like, not everything is black and white. It's very gray, and like, people have a million different motives for what they do. And the news and the media have zero nuance. And so she's like, I'm just nervous about like the judgment that's going to be passed. And so it's just interesting, like clearly how much that starts to get threaded in as she's like getting closer and closer to her own story.
And so we leave Margaret for the day, and somehow Alice and Hayden end up together again because they decided they're friends with benefits. Is that what it is?
They're good friends, they're good pals.
Yeah. And Hayden starts talking about his fears. He's opening up. Wow, Alice is really getting everybody to open up at the same time.
Alice is a literal truth sayer. That.
And so she gets him to open up, and he talks about his fears around growing older, about parenthood, about his health. He talks about his family background. His mother really instilled it in him that he should eat healthy and take care of his body, which kind of created this little OCD moment we're having within the book. And he talks about how when he was writing his biography that he won the Pulitzer for, it was really hard to get close to somebody that was aging and passed away. And that was a lot for him. And he's not sure where his career, his personal life, his relationships really go from here.
And this really well. They end up sharing this like overly sensual hug at this.
Do not remember the overly sensual hug. I was probably
God. They're really walking through like the streets of Savannah at this point, and like Alice is just like, I hear you and I see you, as he's like sharing all of these things, and they like give each other this like very like, I literally can only describe it as sensual. Like, they're like breathing each other in, and they're like, like touching each other up and down. And
I guess I blacked it out because I was like, if we're not going penetration at this point, I don't know.
Penetration or bust. Literally, they like share this sensual hug, and then I think they like kiss a little bit, like, but in a weird way. It was like literally like kissing on their like necks, and like it was so interesting. I was like, okay,
yes, she's like, I do remember this. She decides to like lick him.
Yeah, like there was like a lot of that, and I was like, okay, this like friends situation is just so interesting. So anyway, so they do that, and then they're like, okay, but we're friends, and then they go their separate ways.
So after licking Hayden's neck, they meet up with Margaret for another quick session, straight from neck licking to deep family history. And we learned that after Frederick and Bernie got married, they had Margaret first, and then they had her sister Laura. And after she was done giving birth to all these babies, like an independent woman she is, Bernie was like, I'm ready to go back to work. I'm ready to have my own life, my own dreams, my own passions. And so Frederick was like, I guess if I was in your shoes, I would do the same. So go ahead. But of course, he doesn't actually mean it. And they start fighting. And that leads to their eventual divorce.
Yes. So then we cut back to Hayden and Alice. And
there's a lot of jumping around, guys. Hang tight.
Yeah. So Alice finally gives Hayden her number because then they decide after their weird hug that, they can like text each other. So Hayden texts Alice and he's like, hello. And they end up deciding to meet up at another diner. That's like their thing now. They go to these diners together. And then they decide to go to the beach together. And this is where we find out that Hayden's like terrified of snakes for some reason. And so he has to like carry Alice onto the beach because he's trying to be a knight in shining armor.
No, Alice isn't scared of snakes.
Even though Alice is like, I don't give a fuck about snakes, but yes, I do want to be carried by you. And they essentially have this other just like long, nice conversation with each other where Hayden's like telling her about his exes in the past and how he hasn't dated in a long time. And he just misses the closeness. He misses being close.
Never be able to tell, to be honest.
And truly, is he vampire? Is he a cyborg? We don't know. So he misses all of this closeness, and Alice is like, oh my God, my body heat is just going through the roof. And they end up basically like cuddling with each other, and they're like, it's only gonna stay here. Of course it doesn't fucking And so literally it kind of goes from like high school, like over the pants hand job to like super hot, like everything but session. Like they're like making out. I think he's like just full up all in her body, like whole thing. Like this
I do not know why they're acting like they are 16 years old.
It's very interesting. I don't know either. But honestly, Hayden goes very man with this session. So I was like, okay, I'm kind of into it now. And they kind of end that. And they're like, okay, we can't do this again. And they decide that they are going to still stick with this whole friend trope that they have going on. Alice invites Hayden to go to her mom's house with her because she's going to visit her mom who lives in Atlanta. And so Hayden's like, sure, is it going to be weird? And she's like, no, my mom loves to host guests. And I'm like, are you kidding? This is a house episode of The Bachelor.
It's 100% weird. Oh, absolutely.
100% fucking weird, Alice, but sure. Tell yourself that. So then we get into the real meat of Margaret's childhood in their next session. So she essentially grows up as this child who like had everything handed to her. Like literally this girl, she's like, I look out and there's swans and there's peacocks and there's ponies and whatever. And she like literally does not have to lift one finger other than her pinky. So she basically grows up in this way, but she realizes like what really matters is love. And the way that she realizes that is when her parents start to fight, where she essentially like pre them fighting describes her childhood as like this golden age. And then post them fighting, she says everything gets blue, everything gets colored with blue. And I was like, that
she loves really blue mosaic tiles.
She does. So basically everything like loses its zest after that. And their parent dynamic was really tough because Bernie really wanted to be this like working mom. Like she didn't want to let her career go, her art go. But Freddie was just like, why are you giving up this family for your art? And they essentially get divorced because Freddie was obsessed with being her husband and Bernie was obsessed with her career. They end up reuniting as friends after she has a movie release, and Freddie's obviously her biggest fan. So he's like, congrats. He sends her flowers, and they end up like talking. And they become really good friends, become close again. She like comes over for dinner all the time. She ends up remarrying. He ends up remarrying like multiple times. But she ends up with this man named Roy, who she's married to for 30 years because she's a down-ass bitch. And apparently Margaret said that Roy did what their father couldn't, and that was share Bernie. And straight to the chest. So Roy ends up dying like a little bit after Freddie does, and Bernie's still alive at this point. And apparently at the funeral, this was so sad, but at the funeral, you know, they were like super sad over Roy, whatever. But then it's just Margaret and Bernie at the end, and Bernie goes over to Freddie's grave and just breaks down. Like, Marg has not seen her mom break down in this way, like, ever. And basically Bernie goes, why couldn't you be what you were supposed to be? Like, you were supposed to I know. So
did she even love Roy, or was Roy just a good stepfather?
She loved Roy, but she's like, like, Freddie was it for me. Like, he was my one big love, but like, it just
soulmate.
Yeah. And Alice was like, what do you make of what she said? Like, what does that mean? And basically Mark was like, he let the world make him too small for her, and he couldn't handle their relationship. And Alice was like, well, what's your takeaway from that? And Marg's like, for the one that you love, you unmake the world and you build a new one. You give them anything that they could possibly need. So we got a little bit of foreshadowing in terms of like Margaret's approach to her relationship and love.
Is she gonna be the one to end this curse?
Who knows? But we end this series of chapters with Hayden and Alice going to her mom's house. Her mom is outside gardening. She's super cute. She's wearing her dad's like little sun hat, which is very cute because the dad died. And that's basically it. Like, we tee it off with this hometown visit, and we're going to see what happens in chapter 21.
So for chapter 21 through 31, come back for the hometown visit. But until then, should we get into the bits of the week?
I think so. I have so many for this batch of chapters. Like, so much.
Need to ask the question first.
Okay.
Is anybody else deeply confused by the POV switches and the family tree?
I mean, I think that Emily Henry like should have gone fantasy book and like included a full glossary of characters before this book.
I appreciate all the detail, the depth, it makes it more interesting that we're not just following Alice and Hayden, because honestly, how boring would that be at this point?
Yeah.
But
the book would be done.
It does make it hard to follow. I think readers won't like how confused they are.
I think that was a part of some of the reviews, was that like some of the storylines were tough to follow and like felt somewhat disconnected. I have yet to feel that way though. And maybe it's just because I'm into both storylines.
You have high reading comprehension. I, on the other hand, could not tell you which one is my toes or fingers at this point.
Who is great-grandfather number one? Who knows?
Truly. This was really deep family history.
It's fair. I totally get that. I do think like a glossary of some sort would really have helped, or like
a family tree.
A family tree. Give us a map of some sort of this fucking Ives family. I totally agree. My first one was a theory. After all these weird comments that Margaret's been dropping, I'm like, did she kill her husband? Did she literally kill her husband? And Alice are about to figure it out.
She did not kill her husband, but she definitely was the reason he died. She didn't kill him, but she didn't kill him, but it was definitely one of those situations where, like, they went out to dinner. He had too many drinks because she was supposed to drive, but then they got in a fight, and he grabs the keys from her, and they go on a drive, and drunk driver accident dies. So it's kind of her fault, but she can't live with that.
Yeah. I don't know. I truly don't know. I have just found it so interesting that she's been leaving these like little subcontext Easter eggs where I'm like, you are up to something. You're up to something.
So what I am finding more interesting on that familiar front of who's alive, who's dead, is what is going on with both of their sisters? Where is Laura? Where is whatever Alice's sister's name is? Well, we know she's in the Peace Corps, but it's like, what happened there? And I'm hoping we find out more when they go to visit her mom.
I feel like we will, and that's true. I do feel like she is intentionally writing kind of both of Alice and Margaret's stories in parallel. You know, like, it's almost this like reflection of each other a little bit. So I feel like that might be a part of that.
Alice is definitely set to learn something from Margaret Ives.
Set. Okay. There was another thing that I had where I have found it so interesting how much Margaret can hide from Alice. And I was like, I don't understand. Like, this woman was so popular. She could just look up literally anything about her. But then I was like, her family controls the entire fucking media.
Well, and Cassie, they didn't have the internet until Margaret was born.
No, but her family had like a newspaper. Like, there were newspapers. Like, there's news. There's like still like gossip columns at that point.
Alice works at the Scratch. She's not going into the New York Times archives to find things. Hayden probably is. Hayden's about to whip out a freaking briefcase of archive newspapers with all answers. But Alice works at the Scratch. She's on Chat GPT. Like, who is Margaret Ives?
It's honestly true. It's very true.
She's so busy thinking about Hayden and his chinos, which maybe is his whole shtick. Like, maybe he's trying to distract her with the D so he can go in the archives.
That's go to the real archives, maybe. Yeah, I am intrigued by that because I'm like, they weren't like the only media family out there. Like, they mentioned how who was the other?
The Pulitzers. They kept saying the Pulitzers.
Yeah, like that they were competing with the Pulitzers. So it's like, how? But
again, a lot of crossover to Alice. Alice is also competing with the Pulitzers.
That's a good point.
Wow, is that a theory I just came up with?
Oh, whatever.
Okay, I have a question. No, you're cut off. I have a question. Because you said you don't mind both of these storylines. If I was reading just a pure Alice and Hayden story, I would like Alice, but Hayden would not be doing it for me.
Okay, so what's your question?
Why is he doing it for you?
I think that he's doing it for me because he is like the perfect amount of grumpy. Like, he's like something that I can understand versus like, some of these other books that like go into this grumpy sunshine trope. Like, sometimes they make the guy like just too grumpy, too broody, and
where he's almost like abusive.
Yeah, and like, you don't have any reason to like be this like grumpy. Like, I'm not. Yeah, I feel like Hayden is the amount that like makes sense to me, where it's like, this man has had like a very successful career. He just like wrote this book that, again, we learned like clearly very much like emotionally like kind of took him through.
Ruined him.
He has this like family background where his dad was like the governor of whatever, or maybe the mayor. No, he was the mayor of some town in Indiana.
Mayor of small town Indiana.
Yeah, and he like never felt like he could live up to like the hype, whatever. So it's like he has like actual depth. I don't know. I just like think that his character like has a lot to him.
Okay, this is all well and good, Cassie, but what about the fact that he only drinks ice water and eats salads? I could not be with a man that doesn't want to go get a Dairy Queen Blizzard after dinner.
I agree. Like, I'm not going to sit across in a diner with someone who's literally ordering egg whites and wheat toast. Like, I think that that's a sociopath move.
No side pancake to share is crazy.
Oh, that's insane. Literally, I would leave so quick. I feel like something's amiss here. I can't.
Okay. You can have your question back now.
Oh, thank you. My literal only last bit that I was going to highlight was this whole thing with Bernie and Freddie. And like, there's like this part in where she's like deciding to go back to work, and she basically says like, she feels like she's split in two because half of her like wanted to go back to work, wanted to go back to her craft, whatever. But then like half of her was like, I can't imagine leaving these children. And then she obviously goes back to work and her relationship falls apart. But like that, I just thought that highlighted this like struggle of working moms in such an interesting way. And I was like, I feel like I've never heard it like put so plainly, and maybe it's because people don't talk about it as plainly, but I really liked that aspect of how she wrote Bernie.
I also liked that as well. And I felt like Frederick was at first supporting her. Like, he was like, oh, I understand, I would feel the same. But then he never showed it in his actions. He just went out being a dick. And it's like, okay,
gaslighting her.
That's what men do. That's what men do. They don't understand like the maternal instinct of like, no, I'm actually being serious when I say this. You're just like, oh yeah, I love my kids, but I have to go to work.
Right. It's like this push-pull of like, oh, this life that I know that I love and I'm good at and I excel in and I have my independence in, and then I also have this life at home with my children where I can really just like nurture and love these kids. And it's like, Holy
And why
shit,
didn't-
Freddie, make it a little bit easier, bro.
And why didn't Freddie want to be a stay-at-home dad? Because he literally said himself he was lazy.
Because I don't even know why. He's a little shithead. I literally have no...
Bernie was making enough for both of them.
Bernie was crushing it. Also, Freddie literally didn't have one money problem. Like, he grew up rich as hell.
Right.
So it's like, I don't know. I don't even know. But
I also do think that there's a lot of death in this book so far. Like, I have lost a lot of characters.
it's a lot of
I'm still thinking about the little brother that died from hypothermia in chapter 4. And we're on chapter 20, and we've lost about 7 more characters already.
I mean, that's why she said that. Family's cursed.
I need to get to the bottom of this mystery. What if there's next time?
I feel like they all died from old age, right?
No,
Other than the little
Cassie.
brother.
No, they were all ill. We need a medical report.
Emily's going to work on that medical report in the meantime. I think that wraps up our chapters 11 through 20. So we'll see you here, same time, same place next Sunday. Bring your blanket, bring your boyfriends, and we'll see you then.
See ya!